Everyone. So today's Amud is Brachas Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. We're in the wide lines, third wide line. There's the gemorah. Avud the Shmuel v'Levi, Shmuel's father and Levi, ki avubol lemepek le'ocha, when they wanted to go on a journey, havumekadmi umatzi, they prayed before they traveled. They got up early, they davened, then they went on the journey. When it came time to say Krishma, when it became light, they said Krishma. So come on, the Gemara asks, who did they do this like? Ki hai Tana the Tanya. This is like the sort of Tana that said, Hishkim notis derech. If you go on a journey, you get up early to go on a journey, mevin l'sheifa v'tekeya, they give you a sheifa to blow, v'lulav v'menaneh, give you lulav, you shake your lulav. Megillah v'kairba, you take a Megillah, you read the Megillah. And then when you're on a journey, it comes time to say Krishma, then you say Krishma. Hishkim leishev b'krayna b'svina, you're getting up to go on a journey, you're in a chariot, in a cart, or a boat, mispalal, you should get up and say Davan Ali, Kshigizman Krishma, Kaira. And when time comes for Krishma, you say Krishma. In other words, what's going on over here? The Zman Tefillah is Darbonon. There's no Tefillah is Darbonon, the Zman is Darbonon. So you have to pray. You go on a journey. You can't pray when you're traveling, for whatever reason. So what should you do? You can pray early. Start your day early, before you go on the journey. But Krishma is Doraisa. You need to do it in the proper Zman. So when it comes to the Zman, the time to say Krishma, then you say Krishma. Reb Chaim ben Elazar Eimer, no. He argues, Benkach or Benkach, Kaya Krishma Mispalal. You should say Krishma and Daven. It's talking about later, not before you leave say Krishma. It's too early to say Krishma. When should you say Krishma? When you're on your journey. You say Krishma later, and then you should Daven. Kedei sheyismoich gula letfilah. So it appears here that we're not just talking about the Krishma, we're talking about the entire Tefillah, all the brachas of Krishma. So you should say Krishma with the brachas and then you daven. So the Gemara has been like him, if they go to Machlekes, the Tanakama and Reb Chaim ben Elazar, Ma'asav Tefillah Mu'medadif. The first shita holds that Tefillah standing up is better. So it's better to pray when you're standing up. So how do you stand up? You can't stand up when you're in your car. So what should you do? You should pray standing up at home, and then you go on your journey. If the other mandama holds, the other opinion is that it's better to pray sitting down, but you put gula next to tefillah. You said Gal Yisrael, then you prayed. That's much better. So the machlekes, what's better, to pray standing up or smichus gula tefillah? If you think it's better to pray standing up, so you pray standing up before you leave without the gula tefillah. If you think gula tefillah is more important, so you pray on the journey sitting down. So you're on a plane, you can't stand up and pray. So what do? Do you pray on the plane sitting down, but you got gula tefillah? Or do you pray beforehand, standing up, before you get on the plane, but it's not the Zman yet? So you say Krishma on the plane sitting down, that's not a problem. So Mareimu Mazutra, Hava Mechanfi, Be'asara, Be'shabsa, Deragla, Umatzlu. So what happened over here? Mareimu Mazutra, they used to give a drasha on the regal, when it was Chag. So what did they do? Before they went to the speech, they gathered Machnafi Be'asar, they gathered 10 people in their home, and then they prayed. Vahada Nafki Lepirka, and then they went to give the drasha on the regal. So they prayed at home, they made a minyan fast. Rav Ashi Matzli Bahadi Tzibura B'Yochid Miyoshev. What did Rav Ashi do? Rav Ashi didn't do this. Rav Ashi didn't bring a minyan. What he did was, he said, he davened, while he was giving his drasha, he prayed. And the Rishonim saying, how did he do that? He was sitting down. How did he give it? He's giving a speech, and he prayed. So, what happened? They explained that Rav Ashi, when he gave his drasha, what used to happen in those days, the rabbi spoke, and he spoke quietly. He spoke quietly to a loudspeaker. They didn't have loudspeakers in those days. So what do? He spoke quietly, and he had a guy with a big loud voice. He had hundreds of people there blurted it out, full volume. So he said when it came to time to pray to say Krishma, he gave this loudspeaker a big job to do, right? So he gave him a whole long thing. He gave him a whole long chapter. He said it quietly. So then when the loudspeaker is talking on top of his voice for 10 minutes, in that time he said Krishma and he davened. So they asked him, and what did he do? He prayed sitting down, right? When he got home after the shir he gave, then he prayed standing up. They asked him, why don't you do like Merema Mazutra? Of course. Why didn't you do like Merema Mazutra? So why didn't you gather a minyan beforehand in your home? Why are you praying after standing up? So he said to them, it's too much of a tircha for me. I can't get 10 people. They were able to get 10 people, I guess, right? So he said to him, why don't you do like Shmuel Levi? That they prayed by themselves before davening. They prayed b'yechidus at home before it was daytime. So, I haven't seen the old rabbis doing this. I never saw old rabbis davening at home before they gave the speech. So the machlekes what it means. Does that mean that they would get up early, they would pray, but they didn't pray, or that they never gave a shir at that time, so he never saw it happening, so he didn't want to be samech on it? It happens to me a machlekes. Taisva says, take a look at Taisva Avudah Shmuel V'Levi. Taisva says, Pirush Rashi, Kaimed Amud Shachar. When did Avudah Shmuel Levi daven before it was time? So they prayed, these tremendous tzaddikim. When did they pray? Says Rashi, Pirush Rashi, Kaimed Amud Shachar. It was the middle of the night, before Amud Shachar, an hour and a half before sunrise. It's still pitch black. They davened. He says, it doesn't appear to me to be true. If they're praying at 3 in the morning, then that's not tefillah. That's a zman tefillah. You got to daven in zman tefillah. When's zman tefillah? It's got to be after lice. You don't have to wait till sunrise, but at least there's a bit of light out there, right? So the Pnei Yeshua says in Rashi, it's not muchach in Rashi. Rashi just says kodim hayom, before day. Maybe Rashi means the day is nates. He doesn't mean kodim alois. Taisva understands he means before alois, and he doesn't like that. How can it be before alois? Okay, so let's take a look at this Mishnah. Okay. Interestingly, the Magen Avraham says, why do we stand up? Why do you stand up when you pray? Because for kavanah, says the Magen Avraham. That's why you're supposed to stand up. And nowadays, since we don't have true kavanah, so there's no point. So kavanah, standing up is not more important than smichas gulul tefillah. So it's better to pray with smichas gulul tefillah sitting down than to pray before the zman standing up. Because anyway, the whole point of standing up is for kavanah. And anyway, you don't have great kavanah, right? So that's how the Magen Avraham understands. Therefore, b'zman hazeh is not even a question. Says the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Omer, ein tfilas musaf, and al b'chaver ir. Well, you only pray musaf. The tfilas musaf is only b'chaver ir. Meaning, l'chayra, in public. You only have a musaf when there's a minyan. Chever Er. The Pnei Yeshua explains why he uses Lashon Chever Er, a city with a Talmud Chacham, whatever that means. Chaver is always a Talmud Chacham. When you say Musaf, there is a minyan, there's no minyan, you're at home, double Musaf either way. Reb Yehuda says, this is the most important thing in the world, Reb Yehuda Mishmai kol makom sheisham chaver er yochet potor mitzvahs musafim. According to Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, how does it work? Says Rabbi Yehuda, if there's a minyan in your town, you're potter. You don't have to pray. If there's no minyan in your town, you have to pray. In other words, if you're part of the minyan, of course you've got to pray. If you're part of the 10, you've got to pray. When does Reb Elazar ben Azariah say you're parta from Musaf? That's if there's a minyan davening Musaf. But if there's no minyan davening Musaf, then you do have to pray. So it says the gemorah, Rabbi Yehuda Haim Tanakama. Isn't Rabbi Yehuda the same thing as the Tanakama? So Gemara says, there is a difference. You're at home, you're not praying with a minyan, you can't go, it's pouring with rain, whatever it is, like it is over here today. Right? So Tanakama is of a patur. The Tanakama holds you're patur from praying. Rabbi Yehuda says v'chayiv. So if there's no other minyan in town, you got to pray according to Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Elazar, you do have to pray. You do have to pray. Omer for the Bachanina, Omer of Chia Barav. Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, you're passing like Rabbi Yehuda. That if there's a minyan in town, you're not with a minyan, you don't have to pray. He said, you're saying good. Shapik armas. You're saying good. Shmuel said, listen to this, I never ever prayed Musaf by myself. Never ever happened. Never prayed Musaf by myself. Let's turn the page. We're on Lamadama base, flying over here. Benado. I never prayed Musaf by myself, Benado. What was Nado? Nado was a town with a bunch of shuls, right? It was a big town in Bavel. There was one day that the Roman general came to town, the Roman army came, and all the Chacham were scared to pray together. It was dangerous. It was a Makom Sakana. It was dangerous to get together and pray. So they didn't make a minyan that day. And that day there was no minyan. So then I prayed Musaf at home. That was the one day he prayed Musaf at home. Otherwise, no Musaf. Vachur Rabbanim v'Leitzal, Chacham was scared. They didn't pray. It was danger. V'Tzali b'Yachad, and everyone prayed at home by themselves. That was the story. But besides that, I never prayed Musaf by myself at home. I was a Yochid Shlei. That's when I prayed. Yosef Reb Chanina v'Kra, Kamei Rav Yanai. Reb Chanina said this in front of Rav Yanai. V'Yosef v'Kamar Halach Rabbi Yehuda. He said, you know what? The Halach is like Rabbi Yehuda. So he said, we passing like Rabbi Yehuda. Amalei, he said to him, listen to this. Amalei, put Krakarach lebra. Take it outside, please. Go outside. Don't say this over here. Take it outside. I don't hold this. This is wrong. This is off. Don't say this over in here. We do not pass like this, Rabbi Yehuda. Take it outside. Amar Rav Yechanan. Ani Risis Rabbi Yanai, the Tzali v'Had Tzali. Says Rav Yechanan, I saw Rabbi Yanai that he prayed. V'Had Tzali, he prayed again. This is interesting. He said, I saw him praying twice. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. Says Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera, V'Dilma Mikar like Kiventaite. V'Sef Kiventaite. In other words, what do we want to bring a rye from here, right? Why did he pray and pray again? L'chai, what he's saying is that why did he pray and pray again? He wasn't mechavan, right? He didn't have kavana. Therefore, he prayed again. Sorry, the raya, back up a second. I saw him praying and praying again. And this happened when he was by himself. He prayed, then he prayed again. Why did he pray again? Shachris and Musaf. The first prayer, then the second prayer. So you see from here that you do two tefillahs, you do Musaf rather when you're biyachid, right? Otherwise, why did this guy pray twice, right? You do pray Musaf. So he asked him, how do you know the second prayer, second Shemoneh Esrei, was Musaf? How do you know that was Musaf? Maybe the second prayer was Shachris. Why would he daven Shachris twice? He didn't have Kavanah. He didn't have Kavanah, but L'Seif Kiventaitis. He prayed again in order to have Kavanah. He said, did you see he was testifying about Rav Yanai? Rav Yechanan, the great Rav Yechanan, one of the greatest Amoraim. He was testifying about Rav Yanai. So of course he understood that he was davening Musaf. The Achronim asked, how did he know it was Musaf? Because he saw Shachris took a long time. It's much longer, 18 brachas. Musaf is 7 brachas. He saw it was a much shorter tefillah. He said, that's Musaf. It's not shy to say the first one was without kavanah, that he davened long without kavanah. The second time he did it quickly with kavanah. It's more mistaver to say the first one was long, shachris, and the second one was short, Musaf. So the Rishonim go to town with this memra. There's a lot of halachas we learn from here. First of all, you see clearly from the Gemara's question that if you don't have kavanah when you pray, there's no kavanah, you didn't think about your words, whatever it means, you got to daven again. That's what Gemara said. Maybe he wasn't mechavan. That's why he prayed again. You see from here that you didn't have kavanah, you got to daven again. No two ways about it. And the Rambam says halacha l'maisa that if you don't have kavanah when you daven, you got to daven again. And we're talking about, we'll get into it when exactly. We'll see. We'll see the next few lines of the Gemara. We'll get into it slightly deeper. So the Gemara says, Ravami, Ravasi, we've seen this before. Ravami, Ravasi, two great Amoraim. Avagav Davlut Klesa, B'nekishta, B'tveria. They had 13 shuls in the town. Where did they pray? They prayed next to where they sat and learned Torah. They sat and learned Torah, so they prayed over there. They didn't want to waste time to go to a shul to find a minyan. They prayed where they learned the Holy Torah. Okay. Heichi Davagisi, where they prayed where they learned. Itmur v'yitzchuk b'avdim mishum ravina amalach Rabbi Yehuda shalom mishum Rabbi Elazar ben Azara. He said Allah is like this Rabbi Yehuda. B'chir barabba tzali v'adet tzali. Now there was another story. B'chir barabba, he prayed and he prayed again. Amalei Rabbi Zera says, "My time of it, Malachi. Why did you pray twice? If it's because you didn't have kavanah, don't tell me it's because you didn't have kavanah. Havamar Rabbi Elazar, and this is how we paskin la'olam." Yimoid Adam Esatzma. A person should make an evaluation. Look at yourself. Do a self-assessment. If you can concentrate, if you can focus your heart, pray. If you can't concentrate, don't pray. And my little letter there says that's the halacha. Hello, so why did you pray twice? You forgot that it's Rosh Chodesh. So we'll get to this in a second. But we see before we go further, you see from here the rule. And the Rambam says this. This is how the Rambam paskins. The Rambam says, if you can't concentrate, you're in an airport, there's a lot of noise, you're rushing for the train, and you've got to pray.
You're rushing for the train in the airport.
You're rushing for the train in the airport, it's even worse. You know you can't concentrate. There's stuff going on in your head. You've got a massive, whatever it is, headache. You can't pray. You can't concentrate. What should you do? Don't pray. That's what the Gemara says. Reb Elazar says that's at a Rambam Paskins. If you can't concentrate, you don't pray. And if you did pray without kavanah, says the Rambam, you're not yet. You got to daven again. There's a steer in the Rambam because another place the Rambam says, if you're not mechaven in the obvious in the first bracha, the most important bracha, we say that Hashem was the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. If you're not mechaven in that bracha, then you should pray again. But the rest of it, the implication is, if you didn't have intention for the rest of the Shemoneh Esrei, then you're okay, you're good. Only in the first bracha, it's a little bit of a contradiction in the Rambam. What do you do with such a contradiction? It says Reb Chaim Alevi, the Brisker Rav, he said that, what's the tiritz? The Rambam that says you need to have kavanah in the whole Shemoneh Esrei, that's the implication. You need to have kavanah in the whole Shemoneh Esrei. That's talking about kavanah that you're standing lifnei melech. You're standing in front of God. That you have to have for the entire prayer. But the kavanah for Pirush HaMilim, you know what the words you're saying, that coming out of your mouth mean, that you only need for the first bracha. That kavanah you only need in the first bracha. That's how the Rambam, that's how Reb Chaim understands the Rambam. Chazon Ish doesn't like it at all. Chazon Ish doesn't like this prat at all, because according to this Reb Chaim Alevi, if for a second you didn't think about that you're standing in front of the king, you know your Yitzhak. He says it's not shaykh. Of course, you're praying. You're praying for 10 minutes. There's not going to be a second where you don't realize you're not standing in front of the king. According to the Chazon Ish, as long as before you start you realize Hashem Tzos Tiftach, you're standing in front of the Melech, Now you're good. You don't need that kavanah every second through your tefillah. There's a secondary kavanah, subconscious, some type of awareness that you're praying, you're standing in front of Hashem. But you don't need to be thinking that can't be an ich kavanah. The ich kavanah is the words coming out of your mouth. So he's miyashiv the Rambam differently. Either way, Shulchan Aruch paskins, halacha l'maisa. Not that we're learning halacha here. Shulchan Aruch brings down that if you are mechaven in office, you got to daven again. If you daven and I totally spaced out through office, you got to daven again. And therefore, if you're in the middle of Shemona Esrei and you realize wasn't mechaven in office, go back. Go back to the beginning. Be mechaven. Says the Torah that since nowadays we're anyway not going to be mechaven, it's hard to tell a guy to go back and pray again. Most likely, even though you think you're mechaven, maybe, you're not going to have the proper intention. You're not going to have the proper heartfelt emotion when you're praying. So don't daven again. Doesn't help. We're not going to tell a guy pray again if you blew it. Either way, you've got to be, the Mishnah Berurah says it's so important to be mechaven in the first bracha because mikra din, it's machlekes if you have to pray again or not. Okay. So back to the gemorah. So Vatanya says in the Brisa, they asked him, why did you pray again? He said, why did you pray twice? If it's because you weren't mechaven, I don't believe that you weren't mechaven. Because it says you're supposed to evaluate if you can be mechaven or not. So it must be you did this evaluation, you realized you could have kavanah, so you prayed, right? So it can't be because you didn't have intention. So what happened over here? You forgot it's Rosh Chodesh. That's why you prayed again. Vatanya, that can't be either. That can't be why, because it says in the Brisa, if you forgot at night to say for Rosh Chodesh, to add the supplication that we say on Rosh Chodesh, you don't pray again. Why? You'll say it in Shachris. If you got in Shachris, if you got in Shachris, we don't machzir you because you're going to say in Musaf. But Musaf if you got to say it in Musaf, you can say it in Mincha. Amalei, set him lavit malam or vechnon the tzivur. So he's saying it can't be pshat that you daven again because you forgot, right? That can't be pshat. So Elamai, he davened Musaf by what? He must have been davening Musaf by himself. Amalei lavit malam or vechnon the tzivur. He said to him, when did we say you don't pray again? That's b'tzibur, when you're yetzer with the shliach tzibur. But this happened when it was by myself. Therefore, you could be doing davening again to say Shachris again, if you forgot to say Alav Yovai. Now, when do you not say Musaf again? When do you not say Shachris again? That's when there's a tzibur. You hear the Chazar Hashatz, you hear the Chazan saying Yalav Yovai in his Chazar Hashatz, so you're Yetzer. But if you didn't say B'yachid, when you're davening at home on Rosh Chodesh, you forgot to say Yalav Yovai, then of course you daven again. How long should a person wait between your two Shemona Esrei? You're davening two Shemona Esrei. It's a machlekes if you're talking about where you made a mistake, or we're talking about where you didn't make a mistake, you're davening at home, Shachris or Musaf. How long should you wait between your two prayers? Is there a share? So Rav Chaim Kornbluth Kadesh Tcheinen Daitai Alav v'Chadam Kadesh Tschelel Daitai Alav. That you're able to have chanina or chemla. The Meiri says Tchela is lashon of chala libi. The prayer can come from your heart. So Tchsev v'Eschan El Hashem Uman Damesh Tchela Daitai Tchsev v'Yichal Moshe. Okay, the Rashi seems to be saying there's not much of a difference. It's different shyness. Amar of Anan Amar Rav says Rav. If you forgot to say Rosh Chodesh at night, you don't pray again. Why? Because based in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, based in what Mekadosh Chodesh at night, they waited for the day. So they never said Yalav Yovai at night. They only were Mekadosh Chodesh in the day. Amar Meimra said, Mistavra Milsa the Rav. I like what Rav's saying, b'chodesh mala, if it's a full month. In other words, if there's 2 days of Rosh Chodesh, Not in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, but in time nowadays. He says, I agree with what he's saying nowadays, if it was Chodesh Maleh. Why? If he forgot to say Ma'ariv the first night, he'll say it the second night. When there's 2 days of Chodesh, if you forget to say first Ma'ariv, the first day is not really Rosh Chodesh. It's really the 31st day of the previous month. So you weren't really mechuyev to do Yalav Yavi then at all. So if it's a 2-day Rosh Chodesh, say the second day. But if it's only 1 day Rosh Chodesh, you should daven again. If it's only 1 day Rosh Chodesh, you forgot to say Yalav Yavi at night, you should pray again. Amalei Ravashi, he said, what are you talking about? Amema. Michti Rav Taimikama. Rav said the reason why. Nothing to do with you can say the next day. It's not because you got another day, another night to say over Yalav Yavi. Mali Chasa, Mali Male, Mali Male, Ela. According to Rav's reason, there's no difference if it's Chasa or Male, because the whole reason is because they weren't Mekadosh Chodesh only till the day. That's what Rav's reason was. Based on that, there's no difference whether you said it a day or whether it was 2 days Rosh Chodesh or 1 day Rosh Chodesh. It's all the same thing. Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap it up over here. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for commenting. We appreciate everything.
Yeah.